Sony has said yet again that they are the only ones that can keep gamers safe. Xbox isn't safe, PC isn't safe, Nintendo isn't safe, Steam isn't safe. Well, they didn't say that exactly, and it doesn't matter because it's a bunch of nonsense, really. But here's what they actually said. Get ready for a word salad from Sony. Regarding that matter, we have learned a lot. The way to face the issues regarding PC, for instance, the PlayStation accounts that have been offered, by offering them, for instance, sometimes that tends to invite pushback. But the live service games, so in order to maintain the order of the gaming, so that anybody can enjoy the game safely, we need to create an environment conducive to that. Of course, enjoying the game freely. Having some restrictions may not call it a rule, but to ask users and gamers to follow the manner and those balances are very important, and we have to continue to seek the best way to achieve this. This was translated from Sony's investor call, and I found it over at gamingonlinux.com. But essentially, it seems like Sony is saying they need to have their sign-in for their games because that is the only way that they can protect their players. And this is not the first time that Sony had said something like this. But first, before we get into what exactly they mean here, let's get a little bit of context. I know that some of you probably already know the history here, so feel free to skip ahead. There's chapters down below and all, but if I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me in the comment section down below that like button. But first,
dude, what? You're supposed to be editing that video. Why are you sleeping? Did you go out and party again last night?
No, actually, I feel great. I got plenty of sleep last night.
What are you sleeping for?
Those chairs are just so comfortable. I've tried tons of different chairs here in the NerdNest. I've tried gaming chairs, I've tried office chairs, and the one that I finally settled on is this. This is the FlexiSpot C7 chair, and it is the perfect chair if you want to spend a lot of hours at your desk. I have the FlexiSpot desk as well, and it's awesome that I can stand up and work, but every once in a while I want to sit down, and with the push of a button and grabbing a chair, I can change things up and give myself more options, and more options means that I can get more done. And speaking of options, this chair has tons of options, so you can customize it and make it perfect for you. It has fantastic lower back support, and the actual seat is incredibly comfortable. And the arms on this chair adjust in more places than I've ever seen in a chair before, so that you can get the arms exactly where you want them and make sure that you are comfortable so you can get more done. But one of my favorite parts is this little lever right here. If you pull it, it actually slides your seat forward so that you can put your feet up and take a break. So if you're looking to get a really great office chair for your gaming setup, then check out the link in the description down below, and a huge thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video.
Sony has been moving more to the PC. Hell, everyone but Nintendo has been doing that, but Sony has been doing this for a while now. We keep seeing ports from PlayStation Studios for PC, but then something really strange happened. Helldivers 2 came out, and it was a huge success on the PC. Honestly, I would say it was probably more of a success than Sony was anticipating. But the PlayStation launcher wasn't quite ready for prime time, and rather than let that kill the momentum that the game had, they decided to allow players to play the game without logging in through the PlayStation services. Later, after the launcher was ready, Sony made this a requirement, which was met with severe backlash, and rightly so. It was never properly communicated to customers that it was something that we would have to deal with down the road. But the bigger issue was that people in certain countries are not able to make PlayStation accounts because PlayStation accounts are not allowed in that country. And this meant that they could no longer play the game that they were paying for. This set off a review bomb movement which took Helldivers 2 from overwhelmingly positive to mostly negative in a short order. Now, Sony did respond to that, and they walked some things back, and the review bomb was reversed to bring the game back to where it is today, which is mostly positive. Still, Sony's undeterred, and they've been shipping games with their launcher on it, forcing people to sign in, even in single-player games. Now, there are a lot of publishers that ask you to sign in, and I totally get that it can be annoying, but why do they want us to do it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, having their own launcher means that they get the ability to advertise to us. Launching Helldivers 2, let's put up a quick ad on the screen for the latest PlayStation Studios release. all the big publishers do this kind of thing. The other reason, okay, hold on. I said all, many of the big publishers do this kind of thing. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The other reason is it gets you signed up for an email, which then they can report back to investors and say, hey, look, more people are signing up for our services. This drives up stock prices and helps Sony's bottom line. And on top of that, it also gives them an email list of people that they can then send advertisements to. I totally understand why they do it, but they keep saying that they're doing it to keep us safe. And like I said, this isn't the first time that they've said this. We have been here before. Now we've got to go back quite a ways to back when Rocket League accidentally first introduced crossplay. You know, back in 2017, most games didn't have crossplay support between consoles. So if you're playing on Xbox, you couldn't play with people on Nintendo. You couldn't play with people on PlayStation. And then accidentally, and I don't know how accidentally it was, but Rocket League unlocked crossplay between all of the platforms, and everybody loved it, right up until the point where Sony told Psyonix to shut it down. Psyonix, by the way, is the company that used to run Rocket League before they were acquired by Epic Games and removed from Steam. Fans were understandably pissed at Sony for this. There was quite a bit of backlash, and Jim Ryan, who was in charge of Sony at the time, was interviewed by Eurogamer, and he said this in response to gamers asking to get crossplay in Rocket League, as well as Fortnite and Minecraft. Well, you must see that PlayStation owners are upset. They want to play with Switch owners, PC owners, and Xbox One owners for these two big important games, and they don't have an explanation as to why. That's what I'm getting at, really. And here's what Ryan said in response to this. Yeah, we've got to be mindful of our responsibility to our install base. Minecraft, the demographic playing that, you know as well as I do, it's all ages, but it's also very young. We have a contract with the people who go online with us, Sony, and we look after them. And they are within the PlayStation curated universe, exposing what in many cases are children to external influences that we have no ability to manage or look after is something that we have to think about very carefully. Basically, this bullshit answer is saying that the other platforms are filled with a bunch of unwashed morons, and they have to be able to protect their players from the jerks of the world. And I get it. Sony can't ban somebody from playing Rocket League. Sony wants to control over everything that's interacting with their customers. So they shut down crossplay in order to maintain that control. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox at the time, responded that he wished that they had left it turned on. But I think if the roles were reversed and the Xbox One was more popular than the PS4 back in 2017, Phil would have been the one saying some nonsense to block PlayStation, and Jim Ryan would have been the one saying, please turn it back on. Whoever's on top has a tendency to do whatever they can to try and stay there. But the real reason I think that Sony didn't want their players interacting with people on other platforms is because they didn't want their players thinking about other platforms. Wait a second, I can play this on Nintendo Switch and then take it with me when I go places? I'm going to buy a Switch. And now that I have a Switch, I'm going to spend less time on my PS4. And if I'm spending less time on my PS4, then I am less likely to buy PlayStation games. And that's what Sony was really trying to avoid, in my opinion. Again, just my opinion, just speculation. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know this stuff for sure, but that's what it seems like to me. It seems logical. It seems to me like they're going for an out of sight, out of mind situation back in 2017. But this isn't just limited to Sony's crossplay attitudes. They do a lot of anti-consumer stuff. Check this out, which was posted over at the NerdNest Discord. By the way, you should join. There's tons of awesome people there chatting about games and movies and TV shows all the time. Link in the description down below that like button. But basically, Path of Exile is doing something really cool where they're transferring all microtransactions that you bought in the first game into the second game. This is ridiculously cool that they're doing this. However, yet again, Sony has decided to get in the way. Unfortunately, any purchases made on PlayStation platforms cannot be used on other platforms, and purchases made on other platforms cannot be used on PlayStation platforms. Note that these purchases can still be in the same sub-account, but the microtransactions will be marked as unavailable when viewing them in your stash. Just another example of Sony being extremely anti-consumer and using their dominance in the gaming industry to screw players. This reeks of Sony just wanting to make sure that they're getting a cut of anything that their players bought, even if it's not through the PlayStation Store. It's refreshing in a way that they're not hiding behind player safety here, though I'm sure if they could figure out a way to do so, they would. Now, I think they're doing this PlayStation launcher for very different reasons than both of the examples that I've given so far, but they are using the same argument as they did in 2017, player safety. They want to be able to ban the jerks, which is admirable if that was the real reason. But for them to cite player safety as their number one concern is ridiculous because Sony is not safe. It is laughable that Sony keeps saying safety is their main concern. Although, to be fair, this is translated from Japanese, so even though that was a word salad at the beginning of the video, it could just be because we're missing some context and things don't translate easily between Japanese and English. But if I take them at their word, sure, if they want to ban someone from some other platform for calling me a name, I'm all for it. I don't want to play video games with jerks. And if they can't do that, that does suck. But that's not the real safety concern to me. The real safety concern when it comes to Sony is how absolutely horrible Sony has been at protecting themselves from hackers. And there have been a lot of people who don't trust Sony with their personal private information because they are constantly failing to protect their data. Let's do the rundown. July 2008, Sony was targeted with an SQL injection which led to visitors of a site downloading fake antivirus. In April of 2011, Sony was hacked, again exposing the data of 77 million PlayStation users. In May of the same year, another 25 million users had their information exposed. And in June of 2011, and then again in November of 2014, Sony Pictures was hacked, exposing over 100 terabytes of information. In December 2014, PSN was taken down by a DDoS attack at Christmas time, meaning that people couldn't go online with their PS4s that they just received as gifts. I could go on, but I think that you get the point. Sony's ability to protect their customers has traditionally been pretty bad, so for them to constantly crow about user safety is just stupid. Now, up until that Rocket League incident in 2017, I think most people assumed that there was some kind of technical hurdle that was really tough for companies to figure out, and that's why we didn't have crossplay. But it turned out it was actually pretty easy, and Psyonix showed this to gamers, and everywhere gamers were like, holy shit, we can do this? Hell yes. Sony is doing what any corporation would do, and they're trying to maintain as much control as possible because the more control they have, the more money they can pull out of your wallets. Having said all this, do I really mind if Sony wants to require PSN accounts on all of their PC games? My answer is no. It doesn't really bother me. It did bother me when they did it with Helldivers, but that was only because you didn't know that this was a requirement at the time of purchase. And it did bother me because some customers wouldn't be able to play a game that they had paid for simply because they happen to be born in the wrong country, according to Sony, which is just asinine. But moving forward, if Sony wants to require a PSN login, it doesn't bother me, though I would suggest that if you do want to play those games, you use a different email and password for PSN than you do for everything else, because Sony's firewall seems to be more like a screen door, and if your PSN account is compromised, you don't want all that data leading to other accounts that you have. But if Sony wants that requirement and people aren't okay with it, well, then they should just not buy those games. It is a natural consequence for Sony. Stupid launcher should equal less money. Sony, stop being dumb. Stop requiring the launcher. But if you do require the launcher, you gotta make sure that people can play it everywhere and that it doesn't have kernel level access, because we don't trust you not to screw something up like this. The amount of negative press that you are getting from these far outweighs any benefit that you're actually getting. So just stop. But if they do refuse to stop, I wish they would just be honest and say, look, when you sign up for our shit, we make more money, and we're a business. It's our job to make money for our investors. Just be transparent. Of course, if you really hate it, then you shouldn't buy Sony games, and they will pay the price for it. Doing this certainly worked back in the crossplay debacle because the backlash caused Sony to eventually cave, and now we have crossplay in tons of games these days. By the way, I just finished a massive video about which controller you should buy because I think a lot of people are buying the wrong controller for the wrong reasons. And if you want to check out that video, well, check it out right here. And if you already watched it, then check out this video right here on the bottom. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, and thanks for watching.